Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Bundesliga show brought to you by Over the Bar. Hope you're all well, and as the more observant of you will all notice that at the moment, it's just me. Right now, we're recording on a Sunday night. Don't worry, it's not just me. We've got a fantastic guest that we're going to be bringing in 1 minute. Unfortunately, Mark isn't available to film as he's been away in Munich this weekend and enjoying himself. So just me, and then we will bring in our guests. So hope you're all well. This is a pre-recorded video as we're doing it on a Sunday evening. But again, it's been another fantastic weekend of Bundesliga action. So it's time to crack on with the show. Of course, as always, you know that we are in partnership with Bundesliga Boxes, fantastic company that we work with and have done a giveaway with recently as well, who provide mystery, authentic German football T-shirts. And they've been really busy recently. Obviously, as there's a bit of a Christmas rush going on, so make sure that you check them out on Twitter or go onto the website and see if you can get yourself a last few minute Christmas presents, either for yourself or for someone else. And of course, please do smash a like, hit the subscribe button below. Make sure you don't miss out on any further Over the Bar content that we've got going on, and drop us a comment. Let us know what you think of this particular episode and all the topics that we're going to be going through. So we'll just quickly run through the scores before we bring in our fantastic guest. So just looking at it briefly, loads and loads of goals this weekend and entertainment. Started off on Friday night, Stuttgart beating Mainz 2-1. Saturday afternoon games with Wolfsburg 1, Dortmund 3. Hertha 1-1 with Wolfsburg. A 4-1 win for Koln over Gladbach. Bochum getting an important 2-1 win over Freiburg. Furth losing 6-3, amazingly, to Hoffenheim. Bayern getting an important 1-0 win over Bielefeld on Sunday. Brought us another important win for Frankfurt as they continue to turn their season around over Union Berlin. And finishing off with RB Leipzig losing again at home, this time to Leverkusen. So their up and down season continues. So they're the scores on the doors. Let's make sure that we crack on with the show. So we're going to bring in our fantastic guest right now, which is Travis of VfB Stuttgart fan club, basically. So let's bring him right now. Good evening, Travis. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Absolutely brilliant stuff. So we've obviously been trying to arrange this for a little while now, and we're just to try and get you on. And so obviously, Travis, you're from across the pond. Well, to me that is in terms of myself living in England. Do you want to just tell the viewers quickly a little bit about where you're based and obviously the team that you support, which obviously I slightly introduced?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on the show. We're based in Cleveland, Ohio, so in the Midwest in the United States, right between New York and Chicago, basically, if you know where those places are at on the map. And we run a VfB Stuttgart fan podcast, and we just every week we chat about what we know about the club, which we admit isn't too much, being this far across the pond, as you say. But there's a few of us out here, and the Bundesliga is growing in support. There's probably 5 or 6 different podcasts for Bremen, Schalke, Eintracht, Leverkusen, and Stuttgart. So we're trying to get into that a little bit, and we had a lot of good things to talk about this week for a change. So that was nice.
Yeah, absolutely. As myself, I call myself a Stuttgart sympathizer, but I'm a fan basically. I try to remain unbiased, but they're my team in terms of the Bundesliga, so I was thrilled with the win. But of course, we do our featured 4 without giving things away too much. Stuttgart will feature at some point. So let's crack on with our featured 4. So OTB's featured 4. This was an incredibly hard top 4 to pick this week. Goals everywhere. The Bundesliga just produces constantly. I think there was only one game with 1 goal in it, and that was the champions Bayern. So goals galore. Let's see where we start off. And in 4th place, as we speak right now, it was the Wolfsburg 1, Dortmund 3 result. So obviously, really important win for Dortmund in terms of keeping up the pressure on Bayern. Obviously, they played a couple of hours before the champions and were down early on. And based on how they did midweek, obviously being done the Champions League as well. Obviously, just throw it over to you, Travis. Were you impressed by the way that they came back in the game? And there's probably a lot more positives to take out of the game in the end, obviously, with the return of a certain Erling Haaland as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are just desperate for a title race of some kind. And every year it's Dortmund and sometimes it's Leipzig that kind of give us a little bit of hope. And then they inevitably, when the door is open, they run into the wall. They can't walk through the door. And it looked like that was going to happen again this week when Wolfsburg scored the goal. What was it? Not even 2 minutes in.
Yeah.
So you're like, all right, here we go again. But they were able to rally, and they were able to rally, very, very well as the match went on. What I was impressed was, like you said, after their midweek match, and the knock on Dortmund has always been that whenever they have the opportunity to get the lead, they always of the table, they seem to always find a way to screw that up. And they were able to show some resilience this week against a Wolfsburg club that's been kind of tough to figure out. And they were able to not just get into the match, but they were able to take the match, and when all was said and done, they were able to win the match pretty convincingly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one person that has, again, a lot of the pressure has probably come onto him because of Haaland not being around is Daniel Marlin, obviously the big money signing in order to replace Jadon Sancho. And it's been a bit hit and miss for him. And he's obviously had spells where he's had to take the attack on a lot himself. I think Royce has played quite well as well. But obviously he got the goal and everyone was buzzing. But do you think, Marlon may now suffer again the fact that Haaland's come back? He gets the third goal, and then all of a sudden the attention's back on Haaland. Like, Marlon could have been the match winner in the end there, and he might now suffer from now not being the man, so to speak. Would you agree with that?
I often wonder how that works with egos and such. With Haaland being back, that definitely takes the pressure off pretty much any other player on that team on the offensive front. And if that's the case, then it sounds like that could be good for the club as a whole. I think the bigger thing is them being knocked out of the Champions League.
Sure.
Now they can focus, and now they can just focus on the league, and they don't have those distractions. You add Haaland back. I think, to answer your question as a whole, that pressure maybe is off a little bit. They'll have fresher legs, and I think that little thing there can make a big difference as the season goes on.
Sure, absolutely. We talk about pressure, and again, no more so is there a pressure on the second club of Germany, so to speak, because of the relentlessness of Bayern and things like that. And so a friend of our show, Josh from JJD TV, he's a big Dortmund fan, and I caught his episode the other day talking about how about the manager or the head coach, Marco Rose, and how much pressure is already on him. And they're talking about, they've got to go for the title race and try and measure that with a Pokal, another go at the Pokal, because, of course, they won it last year. And now the fact that Bayern are out again. Do you think the head coach, Marco Rose, has done a good job so far? Obviously, there was a lot of attention on him because of the way he left Gladbach last season.
I'm not a huge fan of his because of the ugly exit out of Gladbach last year. I think for an American sports fan, it's really difficult for us to understand how a coach or a manager can be coaching one team, but then 5 games, 6 games, 7 games left into the season, they've already signed on to another team. And in the case of Gladbach and Dortmund, almost a direct rival kind of. And that was difficult. I think the thing that we talked about on our podcast is, I don't want to say just anybody can coach Dortmund or Bayern. That's not the case, but Dortmund had a lousy season last season, right? And they went through 2 coaches last season, I think. And what happened? By the end of the year, they were still, fourth and qualified to the Champions League. So I think there's pressure on him, but at the same time, I think it's more pressure just not to fall out of the top 4, to be quite honest. I think as fans, we want there to be a title race. And so it was awesome when that brief moment when Bielefeld and Bayern were tied. Dortmund had that little bit of time where they were in the lead of the table. But I think the Leipzig, one of the Leipzig managers or upper management said at some point that their goal is to finish top 4. And I think they took a lot of heat for it because people were like, wait, how can you say that? I think they're saying the reality of it. I think on their perspective, that's what they want. I think from a fan perspective, we would love to see some changes at the top. But I think the pressure on Rosa is just to get this team in the top 4. And I think if they can make Champions League again, I think everybody's going to be happy.
Brilliant. And that's a little bit on Dortmund. And just switching over to a team that you said were hard to figure out. And I think that's a very good way of kind of summing up this Wolfsburg team. Obviously, a failed stint with the former manager that they started with this season, in the shape of Van Bommel. That obviously didn't work. They've now got someone who myself and Mark, our usual co-host, not overly impressed with, in the shape of Kofeld. So they had a bit of a bounce. Always happens, doesn't it, with a new coach? And now they've come crashing back down to earth. What do you think the goal is for Wolfsburg, or maybe the way that Kofeld can get them playing?
I think whereas Dortmund needs to finish in the top 4, I think if Wolfsburg finishes 5 through 7, that seems to be their wheelhouse. That seems to be where they're happy. I'll be honest. A lot of people rag on Augsburg and struggle to watch Augsburg. I struggle to watch Wolfsburg. Listen, they have been much more consistent and much more successful than my club has been over the last decade. But there's just something about Wolfsburg that doesn't spark the interest for me. It doesn't spark much excitement for me. And I'm curious if Wolfsburg's ownership itself isn't terribly excited about it. Are they more worried about, Wolfsburg, Volkswagen, sales and profits versus how the club is doing?
Yeah.
I don't know. Listen, I wish I had the success that my club has had, the success that they've had. But I just can't get too excited about them. So I think if they're in the top half of the table, top 7, they're going to consider that a successful year, and who can blame them?
Sure, absolutely. Good stuff. Well, let's move on to the third best game of the weekend by how we saw it then. And speaking of your club, Travis, they're up next. My club as well, let's be honest. So we get to speak in a nice positive stint after the Friday night win, obviously in front of a boisterous home crowd. So I managed to watch the entire second half, and I caught the highlights of the first half. So I'm fairly up in the know about the game now, fortunately. First and foremost, really, really vital 3 points to stop the rot, really, wasn't it, Travis?
Yeah, they hadn't won a match, and I think it was 5 or 6 games. We had talked off the air about when we were going to meet up together, and I think I told you that, well, it'll depend on how they do. So we may not talk again until February because they've been a bit of a rough path. No, the thing that was exciting is that they had come off those 2 dreadful performances versus Augsburg and Bielefeld, and it wasn't even that they lost those matches; it was how they played. Very defensive, very passive, and injuries played a big role in that, as I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. But then they came out and they played Dortmund, and they played aggressive. They played fun football that this team has been known for since Matarazzo took over.
Yep.
And even though they lost late, that was a lot of hope. And a lot of the Stuttgart fan base was excited about that. And if we could take that performance into the coming weeks, good things would start to happen. And so the question was, what's going to happen Friday? Which performance are we going to see? Are they going to play defensive like they did against Augsburg? Or are they going to play aggressive like they did against Dortmund? And thankfully, it was the latter. And they came out on fire. They came out aggressive. It was an awesome first 20, 30 minutes. And then the game kind of reverted back a little bit.
Yeah.
But the one thing this team has always shown pretty much all season long, other than like that 1 or 2 game stretch, was resilience, that the match is never over. And they showed that again on Friday, and it was a tonic for what ails you. 3 points for this stage of the season is pretty huge. So for them to come off with a come from behind, well, sort of win, especially after the run they've had, was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I completely agree. The first 25 to 30 minutes really set the tone for the side, and a really tidy finish by Ito. A brilliant strike actually to get it past Zentner in goal to give Stuttgart the lead. And then exactly like you said, Travis, the game did kind of revert back to type, and Mainz, they've been a quality team this year, been flirting with the European places compared to how they were last year. Came back into the game and a set piece, which, been a bit of a dodgy part of Stuttgart's game in parts this season. And it was a bit of a simple flick on to put the game level at half time. So I guess that was a disappointment for yourself as well.
Yeah, it's funny how certain themes and trends start to reveal themselves as we're a third of the way through the season. And one of them is that Stuttgart really struggles on free kicks. They just they can't seem to figure that out. Stuttgart lost Gregor Kobel to Dortmund, and I think we're missing him. And he was just so steady, so solid that Florian Mueller's a good goalie, but there's a difference. There's a gap there. And I was talking to one of the guys, Jeff, on our podcast, and we were talking about the 2 or 3 top goalies in the Bundesliga. And then there's a big gap. And all those guys are pretty solid. But you saw with Koln this week, their starting goalie was out, and there wasn't that big of a drop off. And but I think when you're like, you've got the Neuer, you've got the Kobel, Sommers, when those guys are gone, I think you notice it. And I think Stuttgart is really noticing it. I like one of the things the announcers were saying during the match is, even though it was only a 2-1 match, how exciting it was. Stuttgart was bringing the aggressiveness. They were pressing. And Mainz, ever since they had the coaching thing, Swenson, I believe it is they've figured out what is their culture, what is the way they play. They play compact. They play really, some people don't like it, but aggressive, tough, physical football. And they've found a way that that works for them, where they're probably punching above their weight on the table, to be quite honest. So to be able to get a win against a club like that knows what they're doing was huge for Stuttgart. Ito's goal was awesome. The thing that's, I think, the key player for us, and not to spend all the time on Stuttgart, is Marmouche came in, and he's a young Egyptian Canadian that we have on loan from Wolfsburg. And he's not technical or clinical in the box, but he brings a lot of pace. He brings a lot of speed. And you could see the difference he made simply by being out there, that they had to pay attention to him, even though he really, on the stat sheet, didn't do that much. But that goes back to my, because the second goal by Sosa, which was just a brilliant, everybody in the world thought he was going to cross that, because he's just got the most beautiful crosses. And he ends up shooting it, which shocked everybody. I'm curious if it shocked himself too.
Yeah, quite possibly.
But if you look at the goals that Stuttgart have scored, 70% of them have been scored by defensive players this year. And I think that is, in a nutshell, the problem with the club, is that we have so many players hurt who were such an exciting part of the team last year that we don't score goals. And this is the first match, I think, in 7 or 8 matches where we scored more than one. Still defensive players. So the reason why this match was so important for Stuttgart is that we just need to tread water, I think. And we can tread water until the winter break. And then we get some guys who are hurt back. You saw the difference. I don't know what your comments were, but when Silas came into that match, even though he only played for, I think, maybe 5 or 7 minutes, there was an immediate change in the way they played up front. And you get him back, and then after the break, you get Kalajic back. All of a sudden, if we can tread water, I think we're in good shape for the second half.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think what you're referring to there is maybe the altering of expectations because of how well Stuttgart did, bouncing up from the Zweite Bundesliga last season. They're really comfortable. One of the main reasons why, I kind of fell for the clubs, the way they attacked teams, and, they really went for the throat. Typically, that 5-1 win, I think it was, against Dortmund last season, it was superb to watch. And that is so hard to do when you quite rightly mentioned you are bereft of all your attacking players, and the defenders have literally taken it on. And it's fortunate for Stuttgart that they have, because they're well above the expectation. Mavropanos, Kempf when he's been fit, Ito. So they've all taken it on, and they've done really well to keep Stuttgart even where they are now. So I completely agree in the fact that treading water for the club is exactly what they need to do right now, and take a base, wait until the winter, bring back Kalajic. And I thought one person who was particularly impressive and might not get the mentions as much as, say, Endo does in the middle of the park was Mangala. I thought he was superb.
I mean, Right. And that, I think to your point is that if this club plays the attractive, exciting, sometimes risky football that they play, good things are going to happen. And if you have Sosa on the one wing, you have Silas on the other wing, you have Kalajdzic up top, that is a trio that it makes it difficult for other teams to cover. And then you have Endo in the middle and Mangala in the middle. And I agree with you. Mangala is just, many of the Stuttgart fans, we can't figure out who's the engine that makes the Stuttgart machine run. Is it Endo, who is helping to cover for the back three because he's his defensive prowess? Or is it Mangala who's helping to start things because the team builds out of the back a lot? Well, and I think what's exciting for us as Stuttgart fans, and to be selfish for the Bundesliga as a whole, is as this team is getting healthier and as this team is getting more communication and is getting used to where certain players are supposed to be at certain times, that exciting brand of football that people really like to watch is going to come back. And I think that's good, not just for Stuttgart, but I think that's good for the league as a whole. I don't think very many people would be too excited statewide, to be honest, to watch a Stuttgart and Mainz match. I just don't think there's a ton. Yeah. But it's the only game. That was one of the things. It was the only match on Friday. And in the States, we had Thanksgiving on Thursday, and then we had all the football on Saturday. And so people were watching that match. And even though it was a 2-1 match, it was a fun, exciting match. And I think that's great for the brand. That's great for our club. And I think it's just a win-win for everybody involved, and especially selfishly for you and I, because if they play that way, I think the second half of the season is going to be a lot happier than the first half of the season.
Brilliant. Good stuff. So before we move on then, just quickly, two-part question. First and foremost, where do you now think that Stuttgart will finish at the end of the season? And then adding on to that afterwards, do you want to just tell us quickly about how you ended up following the team that you do?
Yeah, the first part of that is when we did our predictions, we thought they would finish somewhere between 10 to 14. And I still think that's in reach. It was interesting. Sven Mislintat, who's the director of sport for Stuttgart, said early on, listen, our whole goal is not to get relegated. And as an American sports fan, that's hard to wrap your head around because our goal is to make the playoffs or to win championships. And if you don't do that, you get fired the next year. And in Germany, maybe it's the same way in England. It's different. Each club has kind of a different goal based on their culture, based on their size. Sure. And when he said that, it took me a second to wrap my head around that. But I think he was right. And I think you get these guys back, and that's what he's been saying, healthy. I think we're lucky, to be honest. You have a team like Furth, who is dead in the water, those poor guys. Then you've got Augsburg, Bielefeld, who are going to struggle most of the year. I think if there's ever a year to struggle, this is the year, because I think the Bundesliga is relatively weak at the bottom. So all that being said, I think if we can finish somewhere in that 10 to 14 range, which oddly enough is within reach. I mean, if you look at the table right now, there's not that big of a gap between, 16, even 17, but 16 up to like almost 8, I think. So we get some guys back healthy. I like our chances to. Here's what I think is going to happen. We're going to have that irrational talk like Stuttgart fans do every year, where we're getting close to 7th place on the table and people start to talk, hey, the Europa Conference League, that sounds pretty good. And then there'll be the other half of the fan base is like, everybody needs to shut up and just be happy that we survive. I'm optimistic that even if we don't get any points the rest of December, that we're going to hit the second half running. And I think we're going to do enough to come back next year and play in the Bundesliga.
Fantastic stuff. And the second part of the question then, whereabouts did this following of Stuttgart come from then?
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. Like many American fans of the Bundesliga, at some point we start to look at our heritage. We start to look at our ethnicity and where our family came from, years and years and years ago. And if you look at the Bundesliga fans in the States, that's pretty typical. So I'm not too unique in that regard. And so my family's heritage came from right near the Stuttgart, Freiburg, Karlsruhe area. And back in 2014-15, when I started to jump on the Bundesliga bandwagon, You could only watch the first division, which unfortunately that's the way it is now here. And so Stuttgart they survived that year. And I was caught up in how they ended up winning the last match of the season 2-1, I believe against Paderborn. And that's what kept them in the Bundesliga. And I couldn't understand why this team that had finished in 14th place, 15th place, I can't remember which, everybody was going bananas. The fans were going nuts. The coaches were going nuts. The players were crying. I was like, you guys just finished, like, you're the fourth worst team in Germany. I don't understand what's going on. And unfortunately, I've been part of the club as they've been relegated twice over the last 6 years. So now I get it. So that was kind of the start of it. And then I was lucky enough with a friend of mine to go watch Stuttgart play Hamburg and Koln play Mainz, as it turned out, about 2017, 2018. And if you've never been to a Bundesliga match, it changes the way you look at sport. It really does. It's the fan involvement, the amount that people care, that players care. It's a cliche, but it truly is a community, regional, and a cultural part of people's lives. And that's really, for some of us in the States, and that's not what we really have here. And so to be able to become a member of a club and to be able to have voting rights on things, and to be able to be part of not just the sporting part of it, but the culture, is such a unique thing that it's, once American fans get into it, like I did, all of a sudden your room in your house in your basement is filled with jerseys and kids.
Very impressive background,
and all that stuff. So I've been a fan ever since. I've been a member for 5 or 6 years. Even my kids are starting to get upset when Stuttgart loses, so I take that as a good parenting moment.
Of course, Brilliant stuff. Thank you. Well, thanks for talking a bit of Stuttgart with me there, Travis. Very much enjoyed that. From the Mainz perspective, very briefly, I'd say a bit of a hiccup for them. They're having a fine season under Bo Svensson, as it is anyway. They'll bounce back, I'm sure of it. We'll concentrate more on them in another show. Right, moving on to our top 2 games. We're into second place now, and the goals keep on coming. Over to the Rhine Derby, which did not disappoint. Fantastic game of football. This game really exploded in the second half. It wasn't even bad in the first half, really. Obviously, the home side got themselves in front. And then I think eventually Gladbach managed to haul them back, deservedly so, to 1-1. And then from after that, it's all kind of carnage ensued, didn't it, really, Travis? But I think overall, the home side deserved the win.
One of the things we were going to talk about on our podcast is different derbies and different rivalries, and how big this rivalry is. And so going into the rivalry match, in the United States, we just had rivalry week in college football. Michigan, Ohio State is a big college rivalry. And in Germany, they had, I think Bayern and Dortmund are playing next week. And you could argue whether that's a rivalry or not. And But Gladbach and Cologne, that is huge. And the co-host on our podcast, Jeff, is a huge Cologne fan, and we've been lucky enough to go to the city twice and watch a match there. What Steven Baumgart has done with that club this year is nothing short of amazing. This club last year was on life support, and they went into that second playoff game down to Kiel, I believe it was, and I had to talk Jeff off the ledge because it did not look good. And they came out just roaring in that match. But even then you said, okay, they've just hired a manager who plays a very aggressive, very offensive, very unapologetically just go style of football. And you don't have the roster to do this. You don't. You have Anderson, who's super slow. You have Hector, who's probably, his best days have gone behind him. And you've got Anthony Modeste, who 5 years ago, sure, was amazing, but now what? And so I predicted them to be relegated this year. And they're still, they're still in the conversation of those bottom 9 teams. But what he has done with that club and with that city is just simply amazing. And he's reinvented some of those players, or some of those players have reinvented themselves. And to be able to watch Anthony Modeste, who could barely run last season, press this season and score the goals that we've come to love from Anthony Modeste is just amazing. Still, going into this match, I didn't think they'd win because You know, it's Gladbach. And when you see Gladbach, you just think, okay, they're going to be in the top 4.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not the Gladbach of, I think, what we're used to. And plus, it's a derby match. And this isn't the Cologne that we're used to. It was a deserved – it was – I don't know if you – the first half, to me, you were worried as a Cologne fan because they should have been up by more. Yep. They should have been up. And they were just missing chances after chances after chances. And you're like, okay, this is going to be one of those matches where they lose 2-1, but they outshoot the other team. They outperform the other team, and they're going to walk off shaking their head. So going into halftime, I thought it was going to be the same old Cologne to where they look great, but the results don't end great.
Yep.
And then the second half was just like you said, it was carnage. And it was just, I don't know if you saw the end of the match where Baumgart went to the home goal side and basically thanked the fans and the supporters for everything they did that match. That was kind of a special moment. That was, you saw how much it meant to him, how much it meant to the fan base, how much it meant to the city. What a great match for the Bundesliga. What a great match for Cologne. And gave them, what are they, 18 points now? So they're looking pretty solid.
They are. And, well, speaking of the game, 1,000% agree. They deserve to win the game. Chances galore. But in the end, they were helped by another erroneous display by Gladbach. So substitute Florian Neuhaus, 1-1. Got the ball in your own half. A bit of pressure. Oh, you've got back in the game. Maybe the best way isn't to play it straight across your own goal. Straight to Mark Uth, who obviously finishes really well. The third goal again, cross into the box, should have been dealt with better, and Duda manages to scramble it in. So as much as Koln deserved the win, Gladbach again shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, I mean, in my celebratory comments about Cologne, you're absolutely right. Gladbach, Cologne they struggle to finish, but if you're going to help them out like Gladbach did, even they're going to finish. And they took advantages of 2 just really poor plays, especially the one I think that led to the second goal was just basically a straight pass. And he put it away. So I'm not going to pretend to say that I follow Gladbach too much, other than to say that they'll probably end up in the top 7, just like they do most seasons. But I think they're still recovering a bit from the Margot Rosa decision last year, and just the club looked like they were on a really good trajectory. I don't know if they've recovered from that point.
Yeah, very good point indeed. Yeah, I think there was a lot of this, a lot of malcontent and upset people with regards to how the whole situation was handled, fans and players and probably the structure entirely alike. So I completely agree. That's a very good point. But at the end of the day, they'll probably still be up there. Right, moving on to our game of the week. And it's hard to go anywhere else. The game itself might not mean an awful lot for the table, perhaps, but it'll mean a hell of a lot to the team that won the game. And ultimately, it's a fantastic display of again, advertising the Bundesliga. 9 goals in the game. Again, just goals everywhere you look, quality everywhere you look. Maybe not from a defensive point of view, but anyway, 6-3 to Hoffenheim. Hard to really talk our way through any kind of structure of the game. Furth came out of the blocks really well. And again, me and Mark have talked about this loads. They have this habit of taking the lead, but unfortunately their quality at the back really does let them down. And some good performances on the Hoffenheim side made the difference in the side of the future of the club in the looks of Jorginho Ruta, who was unplayable at times. Yeah,
I made a note of this when I watched the match. And so this to me sums up Furth's season. And I had a season like this when Stuttgart was relegated the first time, I think 2016 or 2017. This happened to us all the time. So Furth scores that goal, right? They're up and things are looking great. And if you watched that match, Furth they're a threatening team.
Yep. Yeah.
They don't play much defense, but going forward, they are frightening, I think. So they score the goal, they're up. And then Timothy Tillman has a chance to make it 2-0 Furth. And he hits one off the post. Bad luck, right? Hits it off the post. And almost a minute later, what happens? Hoffenheim heads down the pitch, scores the equalizer. And to me, that's Furth's season in a nutshell, is that,
absolutely,
like you said, they'll take the lead. They'll show some just super attractive football. But then something bad luck will happen. And that's just a case of a combination of bad luck and, like you said, defensive breakdowns. They remind me of Paderborn a little bit. I don't know if you remember Paderborn. I think it was in the league 2 years ago, I believe it was. Yeah. And they said, you know what, we play attacking, aggressive football, and that's the way we're going to play. And that's just the way it's going to be. And they were relegated by March, I think. So I respect what Furth is doing. I'll be honest, they're gonna beat somebody good this year. You just know it. It'll be like when Paderborn beat up on, I think they beat Dortmund at one point. They're gonna get somebody because they put up goals. They don't give up. I mean, like you said, they were down. They were down 3-2, 4-2, 5-2, and then they came back, scored another goal. So they're a fun team to watch. But boy, oh boy, you wonder, are they going to stick with what got them here, or are they going to try to reevaluate? But it's almost getting to that point where it's too late.
Yeah,
it's too late, I think.
Yeah, agreed. When me and Mark did a bit of a preview on the two newly promoted sides at the start of the season, we basically said Furth are almost a bit of a throwback to Stuttgart last season, the fact that they'll go at teams and they'll score goals but concede goals. Bochum are very much a bit of a Bielefeld in the shape that Bochum will, generally speaking, be in games and as a result might snatch a 1-0 or a 0-0. And that is basically what's happened. It's quite interesting how mirrored it is, because Bochum now has started to pick up results by in the fact that they stay in games. And lo and behold, they did it again this weekend, beating Freiburg 2-1. So do you think there are parallels in that regard?
100%. Yes, absolutely. And that's why I'm a little bit worried if I was a Cologne fan, because Baumgart's going to play his style, come hell or high water. And we've already talked about this, that the gap between 17th, 16th, and 9th and 8th isn't that big. And Cologne had a great start, which is not what Furth had. Now, there's a talent disparity there for sure. But if you go back to when Union Berlin made it into the league, they played a very compact, very defensive style like Bochum and Bielefeld, and it worked. And the years that Stuttgart has been relegated, it hasn't been because they haven't scored goals. It's because they've let in too many goals. And it sounds very simplistic, but if you can eke out a number of 0-0, 1-1 results, you can put yourself in the conversation to survive. And Furth just doesn't seem to be willing to do that. They remind me, like I said, of Paderborn. Weren't willing to do that. Bochum, Union, Bielefeld, they're willing to play ugly football. They're willing to play counterattack football. They're willing to play long ball football and just hope for the best. And that, I think, has proven to survive. So that's why I respect Furth a lot for what they're doing. I respect it. And if I wasn't a Stuttgart fan and I wasn't in 15th place right now, I'd be rooting for them a lot more. But I want them to have some results, but I just don't know, watching them week after week after week, how you can let in 4 goals, 6 goals, 5 goals, 3 goals. I think when Stuttgart came up last year and they played this very aggressive style, I think the difference was they had a couple players who were established Bundesliga defenders. At least Kempf was established Bundesliga defender. And as it turned out, they had Gregor Kobel, who's one of the best goalies in the league. I don't, based on what I saw, think Furth has either of those two things. And they leave their defense on an island a lot, and that island is just being peppered. And the goalie had some nice saves, had some nice saves. And what happens at the end of the day, he's going home giving up 6. So it was a fun match to watch, though. And the scary thing for me is Hoffenheim seems to be figuring things out. And
very much so. Yeah.
If they start to figure things out, that's a club that can make, especially some of these bigger clubs struggling at the top, can make some noise.
Very much so. Well, they're probably the biggest winners of the weekend, because obviously they won big. A couple of the results have gone their way, and now they're 5th. 2 points off 4th place Freiburg, 4 points behind 3rd place Leverkusen. That's us saying that they've been inconsistent this season. So that is a scary prospect, really, for a lot of the league. So Yeah, brilliant weekend of Bundesliga football. Shame we can talk more on the other games, because even Sunday's games were really, really good, but we had to choose 4, so that's what we went for. So that's the end of Over the Bars featured 4. So again, what we'll do is we'll move on to our talking point of the week. And so we do this every week, where we kind of choose a topic, whether it's topical in terms of a head coach being sacked or just something that we want to talk over with a guest. And kind of this one relates perfectly to having Travis, you on the show with regards to a North American audience. And the talking point of this week is going to be what makes the Bundesliga so attractive to North American footballers. So obviously this kind of linked to North America has sat with the Bundesliga for a good few years now, and it's been a really good relationship. And I think certainly with the use of social media, particularly now, we kind of see these fan clubs coming up over social media via Twitter is often how I get in touch with a lot of people like yourself, Travis, and we see these podcasts coming up, which you've already mentioned. So do you want to just kind of talk about how you've seen the growth in America or North America in the last few years?
Yeah, I think if the question is how did why is Bundesliga so attractive to American players, I think taking it from my club's perspective is that Stuttgart is known for playing youth and letting them develop, letting them make mistakes, and then once they prove themselves, using Stuttgart as a stage to play on a higher level, whether that be the Premier League, whether that be somewhere else. Yeah. And as much as I pride my club on that philosophy, I don't think Stuttgart is unique in that philosophy. I think maybe we do it a little bit more than some other clubs, but you just mentioned Hoffenheim, who's got kids all over the place. Yeah. So I think the league as a whole, I think it's very well known, is willing to play kids and is willing to play youth and is willing to give them a leash. And by that, I mean, it's willing to let them play, but develop them at the same time. So the number of players that come over, they're not just immediately thrown in and it's a sink or swim situation. I really think a lot of the clubs in the Bundesliga want to make sure there's more swimming than sinking, and to where they help develop these kids. So once they set foot on the pitch, they understand the language a little bit. They understand the culture a little bit. They understand the area a little bit, and they understand how to play. And in Stuttgart's perspective, we have an Australian kid. He's actually from Sudan, Alou Koual, who we don't have any strikers. There was one point where we played a center back at striker because we were so hurt. And so there was this idea, let's bring this kid up from the regional league and put him in there. And the team was like, no, he's not ready. He's scored like 7 goals in 10 matches or whatever it is at that league, but he's not ready yet. And I think they're willing to play youth, but they're not willing to throw kids out there. You see this in the NBA in the United States all the time, where kids are just thrown out there, and if they don't make it, they're done. You never see them again. And I think the Bundesliga is a league that's willing to play kids and is willing to develop those kids. I think the other thing is, just from my experiences, and I'd be interested in what your take on this is that of the European countries, England accepted, Germany is probably the most easy to adapt to and acclimatize yourself to coming from the States. The food is relatively similar. The language is not that difficult to understand. The culture is pretty similar. So I think there's a cultural part of this too that I can't really speak to on many levels, but I think it's a little bit easier for people to come from the States and transition to Germany than maybe it is Italy or France or something like that. So you add those two parts into it. I think that helps explain why you see the Pulisics, the McKinneys, the Brooks. And it's not just American players, but you see from all over the world, because they know this is where you can get your start. So I think those two things. I think the emphasis on youth, I think the cultural comparisons. I think the last thing, and I'm totally talking crazy here, but in America, we are very direct. We like to go, go, go. You know, it's the run and shoot in football, the fast break in basketball. It's just we don't have a lot of time for patience around here. It's we don't do vacations very well. We don't do family leave very well. We're always on the clock. The Bundesliga plays a pretty aggressive style of football that I think culturally fits what a lot of Americans are like. This is a total stereotype. Could be totally wrong on this, but I think that adds to it a little bit to where that aggressive style of play. I watched a number of League One and League Two matches in England, and my brother's a big Serie A fan in Italy, and it's just that's a lot of stop-start type of play that I don't think fits the American style. Sure. So I think you add all those things up. That would be kind of my my take on why the Bundesliga has become so attractive to people from the United States.
That's really interesting. And a couple of things I take from that is like I agree in that there's like a duty of care by clubs. In fact, that they look after these players and they do mold them, and the players understand the culture, and often they come away thinking they are from that area. They've been so well integrated into the club. So I agree that the clubs, they do such a fantastic job of looking after them. And you kind of guessed my next question. In fact, that I think does the Bundesliga way of playing football, aggressive, fast play, suit these American players? And lo and behold, it seems like you completely agree in that fact. And it's interesting that you mentioned these players kind of use it as a platform to then go on to bigger teams, which is, in a inverted commas sort of comment, because the Bundesliga, in my opinion, is in the top two European leagues in comfortably for me in terms of quality and entertainment. So obviously you do have players like Weston McKennie going on to Juve, Pulisic going on to Chelsea, and other players getting their kind of big moves from the past as well. It was an interesting kind of look back to that. They're kind of looking at it from another side of things, and the influence maybe from the side of the pitch. Now that we see Pellegrini Matarazzo obviously got his education in the US, and we've got Jesse Marsch for now with RB Leipzig, and David Wagner's obviously got ties as well. So do you think, again, it's a similar sort of theme? They all like to play this kind of fast, aggressive sort of game when it comes to managing or coaching?
It's a great question, because I don't think anybody in the States cares about Jesse Marsch or Pellegrino Matarazzo. They just don't. In the United States, there are pockets of big Bundesliga fan bases. Cincinnati, Ohio is one. Milwaukee, Wisconsin is one. Chicago, Illinois is another. But it's the national team here that really moves the needle. And the national team has not been very good for a number of years. And it's ironic, because the American players that play very well in the Bundesliga, this fast, aggressive, up-tempo, that doesn't seem to translate in the States. And if you look at the best American teams over the last 20 or 30 years, they've always been the Bielefelds, the Bochums, these teams that are physically tough, that play long ball, that are good on free kicks and things like that. They lack athleticism, but they're smart, stuff like that. And for whatever reason, trying to transition a more European style of play into the States has had disastrous results. And that's a great question that you asked, because I don't know why that is. And people here have tried to answer that question for decades. And it's just, there was an old comment that the United States should always be good enough to make it out of the group stage at the World Cup. They should always be that good. But they're not talented enough to make it into the Final Four. That's not what they are. But by playing that kind of very tough defensive long ball style of football, they can make some noise, because in international football, you can get away with that. For whatever reason, I wish I had a better answer for you here. I don't know why. And a lot of us don't know why the Pulisics and McKinneys, who are playing at the highest level, overseas, they come here and we lose to Trinidad and Tobago, a Caribbean island. And you can't wrap your head around it. So I don't know if it's something like you're implying that maybe we should just take one of those coaches and say, you're in charge here and play that style. Or if it's a cultural thing to where that's just not the way we can play on an international stage. And like I said, we could talk about this for hours. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know the answer to this question is that there's probably 2 people in America right now who know who Pellegrino Matarazzo and Jesse Marsh are, and they're on this podcast right now. So it's just the way it is. Unless one of those guys is coaching the national team, they're not going to get much news around here.
Good stuff. Well, I think that nicely rounds things up for this evening. So brilliant show. We probably run over a little bit, but there's been so much to talk about. Really interesting to chat to you this evening, Travis. Really appreciate you coming on the show. So let's just close up this evening by quickly saying, obviously, if you like what you see, please go over to Over the Bar FB and check us out on Twitter. And the website, of course, is www.otbfootball.net. Make sure you check that out. And, of course, the YouTube channel, which hopefully you're watching right now. Just go into Over the Bar and search that. Obviously, we're bringing us yourselves lots of comment every single week. So, make sure you click the red button and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon so you don't miss any of these brilliant episodes that we're coming out with. So all there is to say is, again, thank you very much, Travis. Brilliant debut on the show. And let's hope that we can have you back later on, either this season to talk about a brilliant second half of the season for Stuttgart, or maybe even into next season.
Our Champions League finish. Let's do it, Rory. Thanks.
I love it. I love the ambition. Top man, Travis. Appreciate you coming on the show. And thanks all for watching. Check you next time.
Thanks again.
Cheers.